If we can position our products within that idea of utility, they're trying to solve for something, right? They're trying to maybe improve something. There's maybe a problem that could be solved, something along those lines. Then if we can focus our products in and positioning of our products that way, then that tends to appeal.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Wisenetix Podcast episode. I'm very happy to have another great guest here with me today. Today, I'm having Ben McCormick, and Ben, he's the Vice President of Marketing Services at 𝗵𝗀. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Ben, we like to start our conversations learning more about our guest speakers. So if you could share a little bit more about your background and who is Ben?
Yeah, sure. So Ben McCormick here, 𝗵𝗀. My background is really involved with 𝗵𝗀. I've been here for almost 20 years. So this is my second job out of college. I started out at a consumer agency and then spent about a year and a half there working on stuff like, Florida tourism, cheeseburgers, trying to sell HVAC units, stuff like that. And then quickly got a dose of reality as I got into 𝗵𝗀 and started to work on B2B marketing. But not only that, things that involve science and technology. And I can remember my first couple days of work, I got a bunch of trade publications on my desk. And it was like Pork Magazine and National Hog Farmer. I'm like, what did I get myself into? But very quickly, I got very interested in this idea of trying to understand things that are complex, figuring out how to boil those down and basically change people's minds about products or services. So that's in essence what I've done for the last 20 some odd years working in this space, is figuring out things that are difficult to figure out and explaining that to an audience that hopefully will buy our clients' products. So that's what I do, and that's what I've kind of always done working in the agency space.
20 plus years, you must be doing something right there.
I guess. I feel a little old, but yeah, here I am.
Awesome. Ben, another thing that I always like to ask the guest speakers here, to learn a little bit more about themselves also, is, what are their top experiences in life and what you've learned from those. Is there anything you can share with us on that?
Yeah, gosh, that's a tough one. My top experiences. I've had lots of experiences, but I think maybe the top ones for me, probably the first top one I can think of, maybe going back, was maybe getting my first job. I can just remember thinking coming out of school and thinking about oh, this is great. I've went to college. I've got all this knowledge in my brain. And sure enough, I got a job. I wanted to work in an agency, landed it. It was great. Took some time, but I got there. And then going into it, the first couple of days of my first job at this consumer agency, I realized I really didn't know anything. And it's like, I don't really know how to use a fax machine. Not that we use that anymore. I don't know how to make copies. I don't really understand that when I'm in a meeting, I need to be taking notes and my boss may ask for a summary after the meeting. So I learned very quickly. Everything I learned in college was good, but that first job reminded me that look, you've got a lot of work to do here. You're just getting started. So that was one. That was a dose of reality for me. Then very quickly after I got my first job, I bought my first house. And when I bought my first house, right out of college, didn't have a lot of money, and my now wife, girlfriend at the time, we bought this house that was almost condemned, but it was in a really cool neighborhood in downtown Indianapolis. Okay, so the reason why that's a top experience for me is because it was a bit of a stretch because we bought it and the land was worth more than the house. So you can just imagine how bad this shape this thing is. But what it taught me was basically what I would do is I'd go to work from 8 to 5 or whatever, and then after work, I'd go work on the house. And I did this for 6 months. I'd work from 5 or 6 p.m. to 11 or 12 at night, go to sleep, and do that again for 6 months to renovate this house with me, my dad, my brother, contractors, things like that, to basically make this thing something. So what I learned from that was like hard work. It's like, you know what, it's gonna be hard, but you can do it. And I did it, and it turned out great. We lived there for 10 years, sold it later once we had kids, and moved up to the suburbs. So that was a good experience for me. And then I guess maybe the third one, which I'm sure you get this a lot, I had kids. Wow, that was a big experience. It was a lot of fun. I mean, it's a lot of fun, a lot of work. But I guess for me, what that reminds me of, look, it's not just about you, it's about your kids. And so that's, I think, a good dose of reality too. So all of those for me are like things that like basically give you a jolt of reality and kind of keep you focused on what's important.
Yeah, I got the kids one a lot, so that's true. Every father.
And hopefully my wife isn't listening to this, because I didn't say, hey, I got married, or anything like that. So
it's a combo. You have kids, you have a partner, so it comes in a package.
Yeah, true.
That's awesome. And yeah, this transition from college or from school to the first work, it's always, as you said, like there are some stuff that they won't tell you or teach you in school.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to learn on a practice on a daily basis, and it can be tough. Awesome. And my last question to transition, actually, it's a transitioning question when we start talking about business. And today we're going to talk a lot about B2B marketing, specifically on focus on products of high complexity.
Mm-hmm.
How would your parents describe what you do today?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know if they would know. But it's funny because the way that my son describes it, he's 10. And it's not very accurate, but he basically just says that I make commercials for farmers.
Okay.
Which is like kind of true. Like we work in ag. Farming is a big focus of ours, but it's only just like kind of a sliver of what happens, right? At the very end of the process, yeah, there's probably an advertisement in there somewhere. So that's how he describes what I do, and I just don't even know if my parents would know, other than that I'm in marketing.
Yeah, well, it's a piece of what we do. You do, and for you that is listening to us, Ben and I, we were talking a little bit, chatting, and his expertise is actually, and he's going to tell more about this, but about distilling the complexity of products that involve technology, involve science, which is the case for most of the people who are listening to us. They work within the supply chain in agriculture. They sell vaccines, they sell feed additives, they sell lots of things that are not easy to sell, things that take time to sell. Sales cycle sometimes takes longer than years. And that's a challenge that our listeners, our audience face every day. And I think we can start, Ben, understanding a little bit better the work that you guys are doing with Medicom, with 5Medicom, and your focus. Can you share a little bit more on what we were just chatting before?
Yeah, I think I guess looking back at the work that we've done over the last 40 years, our focus is really around things that involve science and technology as part of the marketing and selling of the product. So we've worked in agriculture for over 40 years, and during that time, we've almost always had like feed additives, animal health, crop nutrition, seed type of clients. We also do things, in building products and other markets, medical devices, things like that. But really, that's kind of the core focus of what we do is things that, like what you said, was kind of, we term that as a considered purchase. It's something that's thought about. It involves emotion, but it also involves a lot of logic. And in a lot of cases, the clients we work with, they work in mature categories, right? Like feed additives have been around a long time. Seed corn has been around a long time. And so in this case, it's like the benefits are fairly well understood about a lot of these products, but where the action is in terms of being able to help differentiate and set some of these companies apart is around some features, which is very counterintuitive to what a lot of people have focused on, especially as you get out of college, where it's like, you should be talking about benefits, right? Not features. But when you get into these mature categories, a lot of times, those are the things that set these companies apart. So our focus really, and why clients bring us in, is to help them figure stuff out, right? They're trying to accomplish something. They've got potentially a new product that they're going to launch into a crowded space. How do they stand out of the pack? What's different about their product? You know, we live in this era of people don't have time, right? There's lots of choice out there. I could buy a lot of different feed additives. I could buy a lot of different brands of insecticide, herbicide, fungicide. There's 150 seed companies in the US, right? Okay, and they're all selling a product that grows corn that is ultimately has good yield potential. What else you got? And that's really where we're brought in, is to figure these things out, develop something from a messaging standpoint. What are we going to say out to the marketplace that's unique, it's different, it catches attention, and changes someone's mind in terms of how whatever the product is or service is can fit into their world and help them accomplish something. So that's kind of what we do. That's what clients bring us in for.
Okay. Here we're talking about technical communication, right? Communicate complex things based on science. You need to have the numbers, the data, all this information to support what you're selling and to support the messaging.
Yeah.
Well, let's start from the start. You got a customer, it's a feed additive company, let's say. They have this specific feed additive. What are the first steps you take in order to start planning and creating the strategy for a product? What are the main things?
Yeah, here's how we approach it. So the first things we think about, we call this the 3 C's. Okay. And so this is just where we start to think about kind of what information we need to help our clients solve whatever problem they're trying to solve. And in this case, you think about it from a company standpoint. So let's think about company, let's think about customer, and let's think about competitor. So think about that a little bit. So from a company standpoint, it's like, okay, what is the product that we're about to either launch or come out with or reposition, or we're fighting generics, whatever it is. Let's dig in deep about what we have. What is our product offering, which includes the feed additive, but also everything else that comes with that company, our people, our research, our reputation, our location, everything, right? Let's really dig into that. Next one is customer, really understanding who it is we're going after. What is our target audience, right? What do they care about? What is the utility that they're trying to solve potentially with our product? Let's say it's like in dairy or something like that. And our client says, look, it produces more milk. It's like, okay, so does a lot of other products, right? Right. And that's good. That's a benefit. But let's dig deeper than that. Why does it produce more milk? How does it work? What's unique about it? What is it? It's the only what. So digging into that in terms of like what the customer's after, and then looking at it from the standpoint of, okay, what does our product do? And then also, what does the competition have? Those 3 C's. So we'd have a discussion with our client about that to get that baseline information. That would be kind of step 1. Step 2, we usually conduct market research. And I know what you're thinking, Ricardo. You're thinking like, oh my gosh, this process is going to take forever, right? Where it's like, all right, how many people are we talking to? But we've got some data that we've used over the last 40 years, and it's proved out every single time, which is basically says when you talk to 12 to 15 of a like audience. So just imagine you're talking to dairy nutritionists in the US. You talk to 12 to 15 dairy nutritionists, you're going to net out 80 to 90% of new information with those in-depth interviews, 1-hour in-depth interviews. You'll get about 80 to 90% of what you're looking for. That's enough to inform the next step, which is, what do we want to say? Let's develop our message. Let's figure out how we're different. I want to be the first, the only, the leading, something that really stands out. And then from there, we have a whole process for developing messaging, and then ultimately on to how we're going to approach the marketplace, what tactics are we going to run, and then mobilizing that out with ads and brochures and sell sheets, and even down to, in some cases, training the sales force. Because in a lot of the work that we do, we know that, okay, we've got, from a marketing perspective, we know what we want to say, how we're going to approach the marketplace, so on and so forth. But with a considered purchase like what we're talking about here, feed additives, there's almost always going to be a sales rep, right? There's going to be someone belly to belly who is in charge of taking it from, okay, I've heard about your product and I'm somewhat interested, to like, all right, let's try this out. Let's get some trials going here. Let's see how it works. How do we create repeat customers? They're going to be belly to belly and they're going to talk. And so we want to be aligned from our marketing message, also with our sales message. Because when those two things are put together, you get that power of consistency and frequency. And that, for us, is where the magic happens.
Okay. Yeah, you brought some very interesting things here. First, on the 3Cs, understanding the customer profile. That's something I want to dig a little bit more, because, of course, there are specific, I don't know, if you're talking to veterinarians, you're going to have something. If you're talking to nutritionists, but you probably also have some common traces, between those ag professionals who work within production systems. So that's something I wanted to ask. But also, my second question would be about this considered buying, this considered purchase.
Yeah.
But I think we can explore this later. Let's start with the customer profile. And adding to that, my surprise on the number of interviews you do. Market research is always something that, okay, now we need to do market research. Okay, how we do this? Like, how many people are interviewing? Which sort of questions are we using? What is the approach? Is it something more structured, more open, a conversation?
Yeah.
What would you say are key learnings about customers in agriculture? And I'm having a broader, I want to have a broader approach here, something that you see as common things between professionals in agriculture that you think are relevant. And let's start with that.
Yeah, I think one of the questions we'll often get is, this kind of, and I don't know if it's conflict, but the interplay between talking about things that are kind of more emotional focused in terms of messaging, I guess, and then also things that are more logical or rational. So kind of that interplay between emotion and logic. And I think things that are maybe not always well understood is that, if you're thinking like, okay, we're communicating with nutritionists, okay? These folks are PhD, they're very smart, some of the smartest people in the world. So logically, they want a really long, hard to read white paper that is a little bit boring, but shares all the data, right? No, they don't want that, right? Now, some people will take the time to read through that, but as marketing communicators, we have to think about, okay, they want the data, right? But they also, I think, in some ways, want to be able to evaluate that information in as easy as possible fashion, right? So I think that's a misstep sometimes from some of our clients, where it's like, look, let's just load them up with, the 160-page, data sheet and let them kind of evaluate it from there. It's like, well, if they're very, 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 very interested, maybe they'll take the time to do that. But for us, I think, trying to figure out a way to make that a little bit more palatable for that audience, even though they could read through that and they do understand that information, doesn't necessarily mean that they want it that way. So thinking about in terms of the audience and say, okay, well, how do they want to consume that information? And Ricardo, there's no secret here. And if we're not sure about how maybe to approach that, guess what we do? We ask the audience. We're going to conduct 12 to 15 interviews with a nutritionist and ask them, literally just ask them, hey, let's say we're going to launch a new product. We'll have a certain portion of our questions related to the market, what's currently out there, how do they make their decisions, what would be a barrier to sale, so on and so forth. But then we'll also spend a little bit of time, how do you like to get information, right? And I'm sure like, publications have their research that they love to read print, blah, 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 blah. But really boiling it down and say, let's say we had a product that did X, Y, and Z. What would you want to know? How would you want to receive that information? Well, I'd want a rep to come out and see me and walk me through X, Y, and Z. Okay, how would you try the product? So I guess circling back to, our approach of figuring out, okay, what to do in the marketplace, which is a strategy kind of position standpoint, we just go ask people and figure that out. So I don't know if that answers your question, but for me, it's about figuring out how to communicate with an audience. And if you don't know, you ask.
Yeah, and I think my question was not the best, to be honest. I was asking first for a broader thing, like common things you see between a veterinarian and nutritionist, ag people. No, at the end, that's not how things work. Like every like niche and professionals, every person will have their personal preferences and everything. But even if we compare groups like vets and nutritionists, for example, or other technical experts in different industries, they will have their specific needs and their specific preferences. So it's hard to just outline that's how a professional in the ag looks like and just have a stereotype for everyone. So
no, I totally get it now. Yeah. So I think if I could think of maybe a common theme maybe among these folks and these audiences, I would think about it in terms of the word utility. So just think about it in terms of like fitness for a purpose. These folks are trying to accomplish something. Mm-hmm. So if we can position our products within that idea of utility, they're trying to solve for something, right? They're trying to maybe improve something. There's maybe a problem that could be solved, something along those lines. Then if we can focus our products in and positioning of our products that way, then that tends to appeal. Now, your approach to get there may involve things like emotional triggers, right? We may catch attention through emotion and ultimately end up with logic where we're talking about ROI, we're talking about feed efficiency, we're talking about the trial, so on and so forth. But thinking about it in terms of like, what is the problem that we're solving for the customer? That utility idea would be maybe a common thread that we've seen with the clients that we work with.
Yeah, different from, as you used the example in our previous conversation, buying something in a grocery store, the flashy packaging with the cool cookies, and it's not different. And now going along these lines of considered purchase,
considered
something
purchase.
Is thought about. It's not a decision made on the second. What are key aspects that you think about it, not only in terms of messaging, but like having looking at the big picture, not only the marketing, but also with the sales team and everything that is involved? How do you work with that? What are key principles that you use when you're planning, the customer journey to make from the start when they get to know about the product to buying this product?
I think maybe the critical point. So we've already talked a bit about market research, right? And really getting a firm understanding of the product and where it fits within the competitive landscape, the customer, so on and so forth. So let's say you've got that, right? Our next step is to then figure out, okay, what is your point of differentiation? Okay, and I know that's like almost a shop-worn term where it's like everyone talks about differentiation. But for us, it's really, really figuring that out to say, how are you different is extremely important, because if you get that right, that then drives the rest of the process, right? So if you figure out how you're different, then that will drive what you're going to say to the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And then ultimately what the creative is you get further down the kind of pipeline there. So, I mean, it's just this, for us, when we talk about it sometimes, it's kind of like built into humans as kind of animals, right? We're kind of wired to detect things that are irregular. So just imagine, like back in the old days, we're out in the woods and it's like, okay, everything's peace and harmony, trees and plants and so on and so forth. But oh my gosh, there's a predator, and that stands out, right? Mm-hmm. It's that type of thing where it's like, we're wired to notice things that are different. We tend not to pay attention to boring things. So if you miss that step and you don't do that correctly, it's kind of like pushing rope uphill. It's a tough task as you get later into the process. And what we found, if you don't get that right, then you end up, you can overcome it, but it just costs a lot more money. You're running a lot more ads. You're needing to explain things more sales calls, so on and so forth. So if you can get that front end part correct, it makes a lot of the work easier. We'll sometimes liken this to like, okay, you're out splitting wood, right? And you got an axe. And it's like, okay, Ricardo, you're a strong guy. You can really work your way through wood regardless of how sharp that edge is on the axe. But if we really, really get a sharp edge, a precise message, a point of differentiation, the effort to strike that piece of wood and split it into firewood is so much easier. So I would say that is really a critical item. Once we figure that out, their point of differentiation, we immediately think about what is our messaging. And for us, it's as simple as, what do you want to say? What do you want to say? Answer that question. Our technique and our approach to this is called a 3:30 message. So it's the classic, okay? It's like the elevator pitch. You've got 30 seconds. You're riding with in an elevator with someone, and they ask you about your product, or you got 30 seconds to sell them on your product. What are you going to say? So we call it a 3:30 message. It stands for a 3-second message. Literally, if you had 3 seconds to talk about your product or service, what are you going to say? And then let's say you had 30 seconds. Support that singular message, that tip and edge of the axe, with 3 support points. Boom, you got a 3-second and a 30-second message. Now the model goes on from there to support that statement with a 3-minute message and ultimately a 30-minute message. So just imagine on one page, not two-sided, one page, you've got enough to have a 30-minute presentation on what your product is, how it's different, and why someone should buy it. So that's our approach, and that gets you to, okay, now you know what you're going to say. Then from there, it becomes a creative exercise of, okay, I need to express that to the audience in a way that's going to catch attention, it's going to draw them into our story, and ultimately lead them to the step where it's like, okay, I've done my homework. I kind of know that potentially this might be a good fit for my producers or whatever market we're in. And I'm ready to talk to a rep. So whether that rep shows up and starts the call, we will have already paved the way. Now, if the rep shows up and is on message, right, and says a similar thing, sticks to the, and it's not really a script, but sticks to the main message, now you've got, okay, we've got our marketing messages aligned with our sales messages. And that's really where it's like, okay, this is legit. It makes sense. And now we get that buyer further along that journey to where they're like really considering trial and adoption.
Awesome. Yeah. When you were, talking about how we are wired to see irregularities or, things that are different, I remembered a lesson that I learned in my early career as a designer. A lot of times I would project some sort of packaging or something, and I would look at the product, I would think about something, I would do something not necessarily flashy, but beautiful, and I was like, yeah, that's going to work. I was not taking into consideration the context, right? So if I put that packaging, that beautiful packaging, in a shelf, and then there's a lot of different things there as well, like different. I put it in a context of noise, lots of noise, and there's some that are similar, some are different, but just, it's just one more packaging in the noise of packages. So I started understanding, okay, before I start planning a package, thinking of the product, I need to understand where is it placed. So I would go to a shelf, to the market or anything like that, and would evaluate all the competitors, look like how they, okay, maybe the thing that will stand out here is just a white package because everything is colored, and maybe I don't need a lot of things. I just need something that will bring the eyes of the consumer to this point here where I have my product. So I think that's something that we see in other areas as well. And another thing that you shared about the differentiate or some sort of unique selling proposition, what makes you different from the rest. I have one question, and I want to, not a question, a thought.
Yeah.
And I want to hear what you think about it. I want to listen what you think about it. Lots of times we have in our minds that, these professionals in the ag, the producers, nutritionists, and everything, they can be a little bit, what's the word? Not restricted, but there are some barriers for you to implement new things, the acceptance of new things, of new concepts and everything. How do you work when you have something new? You need to differentiate, but you also need to make this thing that is different to be accepted by the person on the other side. How do you face these barriers of like, hey, it's something too new, maybe? Is it worth for me to try this? Or maybe it's a lot of innovation. How do you navigate that on a market like agriculture?
Yeah, it's interesting, as you think about like, if we're talking feed additives, for instance, and you think about it like a category, like a product category, like phytogenics, right? And it's like, okay, do they work as well as a medicine,
mm-hmm.
right? And what is the expectation there, right? And so, thinking about it maybe from that regard, or like, let's say you're in crop protection, you're thinking about biologicals or something like that, right? Where it's like, look, there is a different expectation of the product performance of something that maybe doesn't have kind of a systematic, repeatable performance, right? And I guess from an approach standpoint, what we would, and we work in both of those spaces, but like, thinking about it in terms of what can you hook to that does have credibility.
Something that is validated already. That's the word, like, yeah, exactly.
So let's say that like, like in the biological space or something like that, you've had a lot of like one-offs that have launched by companies that aren't as legit as maybe one of our clients, right? That doesn't have 100-year history, that doesn't have that scientific R&D rigor. That's part of the product that we're selling. A lot of people, think, and salespeople sometimes less experienced salespeople think that they're selling a singular product, like a bottle of water. It's like, that's it, right? This one particularly costs a lot more than one that is, maybe, just kind of an off brand. So, but there's a lot that goes into a product, right? And we talked about this earlier, this idea that like, it's not just the singular item that is being consumed or sold, but also the experience, the support, and so on and so forth. So I think hooking things to what is credible is always a good idea if you have it, right? But then let's say you don't have that. What do you do? Let's say it's brand new. It's a brand new company. They're the first. That's certainly different.
It's a blue ocean. It's really good. A lot of opportunities to explore, but at the same time, having the person on the other side accepting this new idea, it's also a challenge. That's what
yeah, you might rely a little bit more on things that they are comfortable with. So let's say that you're trying to improve whatever the performance metric is. Okay. Maybe you've got a little bit of data. Maybe it's just like benchtop data, right? Where it's not like, okay, it's not actual animal studies by University of X, Y, and Z, but it shows efficacy. It's like, okay, and then what's your request of that audience? Maybe you just get your foot in the door somewhere. You find a few veterinarians or a few nutritionists that are willing to give it a try, right? And you heavy up on just a few and get very focused on just a few as kind of your beachhead, and you expand from there. Because if you can sell just a few that have credibility, then potentially they can help you sell beyond that. So I think there's a lot of different techniques. It's hard to just kind of, think about, a fantasy product. But I think in general, hooking to things that are credible, hooking to things that they care about, delivering information in a way that they're used to, even if it's not exactly what they would love, which is university data. We may have, mode of action data or something like that that says, hey, look, this makes sense. I understand they're just getting started. They're working on trials. It'll be a few years. I'm an early adopter. I like innovation. I like to be on the front end of innovation. My clients hire me because I'm on the front end of innovation. So leveraging some of those things and appealing to those desires would be, I think, a good first step in those situations.
It's a lesson learned, hooking. No, that's awesome. Ben, I hope you have some more minutes. My last question here, we were talking a lot about navigating complex markets and addressing complex messages to, in the B2B business. What are the secrets for distilling a message? What are the things you must take in consideration when you get this 100-page research and you need to bring down to a 1-page article or to a 3-second and 30-second message?
Yeah, it's gonna sound easy, but it's really not. It's really making some tough decisions, I think, in terms of really, it's kind of, I think, that intersection of understanding the audience, understanding I'm like visually drawing a Venn diagram here, but like the competitor, the company, which is basically your product, and then the customer. If you can find kind of that like core area of that Venn diagram of where those things intersect, which is like, okay, you understand the customer, you understand what they're trying to get done, you understand the problem that potentially your product can solve. You also understand then from a competitive standpoint where we're unique. Then staying laser focused on that particular point of differentiation, which then builds your messaging, is the key to it. So in order to do that, you kind of have to have that understanding. There are probably a bunch of different ways to get there. For us, it's doing that research. It's looking at the competition, talking to your audience, and then really it's like rolling up your sleeves and trying to figure this thing out, which is tough. I mean, it's not easy work. We joke around here is that like the clients, they save all the easy stuff for themselves. The stuff they lob over the fence is the hard stuff, right? And that's why we have a business, because this stuff is very difficult. It's hard to make difficult choices. A lot of times clients, they've got a situation where they've got a team. They have a boss who has an opinion. They have a technical folks that are very smart people, right? They understand the product, but they're not marketers, right? And so it's a tough situation to be a client or a product manager in that scenario, because you've got forces that are pushing against them. And what they've got to figure out is, okay, really, if I want to sell this product, market and sell this product, I've got to make tough choices. We often joke about this, not joke, but I mean, key philosophy of ours. We talk about it in a bed of nails. A bed of nails. So just imagine you're like at a carnival, right? And there's like part of the freak show is a person who can lay on a bed of nails and not get hurt, right? It's, see that all the time. You step on a nail, it's going to hurt, okay? That's the idea. If you got a singular idea that you're trying to get across, that 3-second message supported by 3 points, people aren't going to forget it. Going to step on that nail and it's going to hurt. It's going to sink into their brain and it will put you that much further ahead. So that for us, you've got to get there. If you don't get there, it's going to be tough.
Perfect. It's a simple diagram for you to draw, not a very simple thing to get accomplished and done at the end, right?
It's hard to execute. You had asked me like, early in our call, you would ask, hey, you determine how many secrets you want to share. We don't have a lot of secrets. We've written 3 books. We've got over 40 documents published online on how to do this on our website, 5medicom.com. And it's hard to do. Even if we work with big clients that have multiple agencies, they've adopted some of these principles themselves. It's hard to do. How do you get down literally 3 seconds? That's not a lot of time. It's not even a full sentence. It might be 5 or 6 words. You have to make tough choices, right? And you're looking for that nail. It's the other analogy we'll sometimes use is like, let's say you're trying to start a fire, right? And you've got some coals. If you can get those coals and put them into a tight little pile, the idea of you getting a blaze is so much better than if you separate those coals out and they're going to extinguish. You have to make tough choices. You have to determine what is your point of differentiation and then build your messaging and your whole campaign or brand around that. And that's how we've had a lot of success over the last 40 years.
That's awesome. Ben, thank you so much. We're getting to the end of our conversation here. For us to wrap up, I like to ask the guest speakers, like, what are books or movies or documentaries or podcasts they would like to recommend? You guys written 3 books. So what are the names of those books?
Yeah, I've got them on my desk here. Let me grab them. So one of them is called Different Rules.
Different Rules.
That's probably backwards. I don't know. But anyway, Different Rules. So that's one of the books. It's all about differentiation. One is called The People-Powered Brand. So that one is really about the idea that, okay, from a marketing perspective, what is your brand about? But also you've got to align your people. Behaviors, when it comes to considered purchase, that's extremely important. It means a lot more to a company that is in a considered purchase selling situation versus someone trying to sell candy bars, right? You can sell a candy bar with advertisements. You cannot sell a feed additive just through an advertisement, right? You can create awareness and interest. You need a salesperson to carry the rest of the load. That's what that book is about. The third book that we've written is about, it's called Brand Busters. And this is all on our website, so you can see it. And there's, I think, links to where you can, read the book and so on and so forth. But it's really about it's about like kind of 7 ways that brands can get off track and how to avoid those different pitfalls.
Awesome.
So, and if you go to our website too, the other place, we've got a knowledge hub on there that shares a lot of this information, like the idea of like 12 to 15 interviews. That's out 80 to 90% new information. The whole 330 message model, that's all there. We have stuff on persuasion and this idea that, like, basically part of the 330 model is that people can only remember up to about 3 things and then they start to forget. And persuasion also goes down when you start to talk about more than 3 things. So if you're thinking about trying to articulate a message about a product, really there's power in 3 things. Not only for someone's ability to remember something, but also to be persuaded by something. So if you have a product that has 7 great things about it, boil it down to 3 things. Main headline plus 3 items. So that's kind of you'll see a lot of that in our books and our website.
I'm taking notes here.
Hey, that's awesome.
Yeah, I love these interviews when I got to learn practical things and concepts. I loved it. I'm definitely having a look at 5metacom.com. Is that the right domain?
It is. It's 5metacom.com.
Yeah, we're daily, working with communication, marketing, sales, and there are some very interesting things you shared with us here today. Appreciate it. I'm sure that everyone that is out there in the audience listening to this episode also learned a lot of new things. So, Ben, thank you very much for your participation, for taking the time to be here with us today. My last thing to the audience, if anyone in the audience wants to connect and find you online, what are the best channels?
Yeah, 5metacom.com. That's the best channel. Feel free to go on there and read some books, send us a note, whatever. Happy to connect. That'd be the best spot.
LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn. LinkedIn's fine too.
Ben McCormick for you guys. We're going to have his name in the name of the episode so you can easily find him. And that's it for today. Thanks for everyone that stayed here with us listening to this great conversation. Ben, sorry for any mistakes with my English. It's a little bit broken today, but I think we were able to cover some really interesting things.
No, appreciate the opportunity and the time. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And I'll see you on our next episode.